The moment my daughter wrinkled her nose and said my car smelled like fast food, something inside me finally snapped. We were standing in the kitchen of the house I paid off 12 years ago. Morning light was coming through the blinds, hitting the old oak table where I'd just set down a paper bag with 2 sausage biscuits and a cup of burnt diner coffee I hadn't finished during my last DoorDash run. Vanessa leaned against the counter, arms folded, looking at me like I had tracked mud across a white carpet. "Mom, seriously," she said, waving a hand in front of her face. "Your car reeks. Fries, grease, burgers. It's embarrassing. I hate when my friends have to get in there." For a second, I just stood there holding my keys. 71 years old, up since 5 in the morning, delivering pancakes, burritos, and egg sandwiches across half the county while my grown children slept like teenagers upstairs. And she was embarrassed by the smell of fries. "Your friends?" I said slowly. Vanessa rolled her eyes and reached for the refrigerator. "Yeah, normal people don't want to ride around in a car that smells like a drive-thru." Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. That meant Brian was finally awake. It was already almost 11. My son shuffled down the stairs a minute later in the same gray sweatpants he'd been wearing for 3 days. His hair looked like it had lost a fight with a pillow. "Morning," he mumbled, opening the cabinet and grabbing a bowl. "Morning," Vanessa said with a laugh. "Mom's been out working since sunrise." Brian poured cereal and shrugged. "She likes driving around." Likes. That word landed heavier than the rest. I set my keys on the counter and took off my cardigan. The kitchen smelled faintly of maple syrup and cold coffee. There was also a trace of something sweeter, the cardamom bun I'd bought from a little bakery downtown during a delivery. I'd planned to eat it later. Instead, I just stood there watching my 2 adult children move around my kitchen like they owned the air in it. Brian sat at the table, scrolling on his phone while chewing cereal loud enough to echo. Vanessa grabbed a bottle of almond milk and poured it into a glass, glancing at me again. "You know," she said casually, "if you're going to keep doing that food delivery thing, you should at least get the car detailed or something. It's kind of depressing." Depressing. That was the word she chose. Not hardworking, not responsible, not necessary. Depressing. I looked at the sink full of dishes neither of them had bothered to wash the night before. A pan still had dried tomato sauce glued to the bottom. Someone had left a spoon stuck upright in a bowl of oatmeal that had hardened into something resembling plaster. The Wi-Fi bill was on the counter under a magnet shaped like a lemon. I paid that. The electric bill too. Groceries, insurance, property taxes. Every single thing in this house ran through me, and yet somehow I was the embarrassing one. Brian glanced up from his phone. "Hey, Mom, did you grab more eggs while you were out?" I let out a quiet breath. "No," I said. Vanessa sighed dramatically. "Great. I was going to make shakshuka later." I almost laughed at that. Shakshuka. In my kitchen. With eggs I would have paid for. For years I had told myself they were just getting back on their feet. Jobs fell through. Rent got expensive. The economy changed. Little excuses, stacked one on top of another like dishes in that sink. But standing there with the smell of coffee and cold hash browns still clinging to my jacket, I realized something uncomfortable. They weren't struggling. They were comfortable. Because I made it comfortable. Vanessa took a sip of her almond milk and wrinkled her nose again. "And seriously," she added, "you should do something about that car. It smells like a McDonald's parking lot." I picked up the paper bag from the table, and folded the top neatly. Then I walked to the trash can and dropped it inside. Neither of them noticed. Brian was watching some video on his phone. Vanessa was texting someone. For a long moment, I just stood there, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. 71 years old, still working, still paying, still being talked to like a nuisance in my own house. That was the moment the idea first slid quietly into my mind. Not loud, not dramatic, just a simple thought. What would happen if this house stopped being theirs? Hello, my friends. It's Grace. Our heroine Helen is 71 and still working while her adult kids sleep all morning. Hearing a daughter talk to her mother like that, it really says a lot. Tell me, have you ever seen something like this in a family? If you had walked through my house around noon most days, you might have thought you'd stepped into some strange retirement home where the young people were the ones being cared for. By 11:30, the blinds were usually still half closed upstairs. The hallway smelled faintly of body spray and microwave popcorn. Somewhere, a phone alarm would buzz for 10 minutes before someone finally slapped it silent. Meanwhile, I had already delivered 3 breakfasts, 1 oat milk latte, and a paper bag full of bacon croissants to a law office downtown. My mornings started at 5. I kept a small thermos in the car and a wool blanket folded behind the passenger seat for winter mornings. My Buick wasn't fancy, but it ran steady. The seats held the faint perfume of 1,000 deliveries. Fries, garlic knots, cinnamon rolls, once even a container of pho that leaked star anise broth into the floor mat. Vanessa said the smell embarrassed her, but that smell paid the electric bill. I hung my cardigan on the back of a chair and started filling the sink with hot water. The dishes from last night clinked together as I stacked them. Someone had tried to rinse the pasta pot, but left a red ring of sauce hardened along the rim. From the table, Brian spoke without looking up from his phone. So, no eggs? No eggs, I said. He sighed like a disappointed prince. Guess I'll just order something. Of course he would. Vanessa was scrolling through something on her tablet now, legs crossed on the couch like she was in a cafe instead of her mother's living room. You should try that Thai place on Maple, she told him. Their pad krapao is insane. Brian nodded. Yeah, but it's like $20. They both glanced toward me at the same time. It wasn't even subtle anymore. For years, I used to jump in right there. I'd say something like, "Don't worry, I'll grab groceries later, or I'll cover it this time." Today, I kept scrubbing the pan. The water smelled faintly of lemon soap. Outside, a delivery truck rolled past the house with that low diesel rumble that vibrates through the floorboards. Vanessa noticed my silence. "Mom," she said, "did you hear me?" "I heard you." Well, what?" She frowned like I was the one being strange. "Are you going shopping later?" I rinsed the plate slowly. "Probably not." Brian leaned back in his chair. "Why not?" I shrugged. Didn't feel like it. That answer seemed to confuse both of them more than if I'd yelled. Vanessa stood and walked toward the fridge again. She opened it, stared inside for a few seconds, then shut it with a small, irritated push. "There's nothing here," she said. That wasn't exactly true. There was yogurt, half a jar of apricot preserves, some cheddar, a bundle of scallions, and the leftover lentil soup I'd made 2 nights ago in my old cast-iron Dutch oven. But none of it counted to them. Brian glanced at the fridge like it had personally offended him. "You used to keep it stocked." "Used to." I dried my hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. Funny thing about words. Sometimes they don't sting until you hear them out loud. Used to. They were right. I used to keep it stocked. I used to cook dinners that took 2 hours. I used to leave little containers of things in the fridge. Roasted carrots with honey, lemon chicken, once even a ridiculous saffron rice dish I'd learned from a cookbook after a delivery to a Persian restaurant. Back when I still believed gratitude was coming eventually. Vanessa sat back down with a huff. You know, she said, it would just be easier if you slowed down with all that delivery stuff and focused on the house again. Focused on the house. The house that had been mine since 1994. The house whose mortgage I finished paying the year Brian turned 25. I looked around the kitchen slowly. The oak cabinets were a little worn at the handles now. The floor had a small crack near the dishwasher tile where Brian had dropped a toolbox years ago. The house had held birthdays, Christmas mornings, my husband's quiet laugh when he used to sneak extra sugar into his coffee. And lately, it had been holding 2 adults who treated it like a free hotel. Brian suddenly spoke again. Actually, Mom, he said, still staring at his phone, I might need to borrow the car later. I blinked once. My car? Yeah, just for a bit. Vanessa perked up. Oh, good idea, she said. Just air it out first. That was when I realized something that felt both heavy and strangely freeing. Neither of them had asked how my morning went. Neither had asked if I was tired. Neither had asked if I needed help. The only thing they had noticed about my work was the smell. I walked over to the window and looked out at the driveway. My old Buick sat under the maple tree, sunlight reflecting off the windshield. That car had taken me through rainstorms, snow, and one terrifying delivery during a thunderstorm that rattled the steering wheel. It had carried hundreds of meals. It had carried my independence. And suddenly, standing there in my own kitchen, another quiet thought formed beside the one from earlier. If the house disappeared, they'd have nowhere to sleep until noon. I watched a breeze move through the maple leaves outside. Then I said something that made Brian finally look up. No, I told him calmly. You can't borrow the car. He frowned. Why not? I turned from the window. Because, I said, I might need it. And for the first time in a long while, that was actually true. 2 days after the car smells like fast food comment, the real humiliation arrived. Not louder, just sharper. It was a Saturday, which meant the neighborhood was busy. Lawns getting mowed, dogs barking behind fences, someone grilling too early in the afternoon, so the smell of charcoal floated through the street like a lazy cloud. I had just finished a delivery, 3 banh mi sandwiches, and a little box of pandan cake from a Vietnamese cafe downtown. The smell of cilantro and pickled carrot still lingered in the car when I pulled into the driveway. My hands ached the way they sometimes do after a long morning of driving. Nothing dramatic, just that quiet stiffness you earn after 71 years of using them. I grabbed my tote bag and walked toward the house. The front door was open. That alone was unusual. Inside, I could hear voices. Vanessa's voice, bright and performative, the way it gets when she's talking to people she wants to impress. And another voice I didn't recognize. I stepped into the hallway. I swear, Vanessa was saying with a little laugh, my mom just refuses to slow down. I paused by the doorway to the living room. There was a woman sitting on the couch, tall, polished, maybe early 40s, wearing a cream blazer and holding a glossy folder. A realtor's folder. Vanessa spotted me first. Oh, she said lightly. There she is. The woman turned and smiled politely. Hello, she said. You must be Helen. For a moment, my brain took a second to catch up. Yes, I said slowly. Vanessa stood up and gestured vaguely toward the woman, like she was introducing a neighbor who'd come to borrow sugar. This is Melissa, she said. She's just showing me some options. Options. The word hung in the air. Melissa extended her hand. I work with a local brokerage, she said warmly. Your daughter mentioned she might be looking at places nearby in the next year or two. Next year or two. That sounded suspiciously like a story Vanessa had rehearsed. Oh, I said. Vanessa gave me that tight little smile she uses when she's pretending everything is normal. Yeah, she said quickly. Just exploring possibilities. I set my tote bag down slowly on the entry table. Inside the bag were two things: a folded DoorDash receipt and a small paper box holding a lemon tart the cafe owner had slipped in as a thank you for always being polite. Suddenly, I felt very tired. Melissa opened the folder and spread out a few glossy photos on the coffee table. Townhouses, new builds, open kitchens with white marble islands that probably stained the first time someone spilled wine. Vanessa pointed at one. That one's nice, she said. Melissa nodded. It's in a gated community, quiet area, a lot of young professionals. Young professionals. Brian wandered into the room at that moment, scratching the back of his head. What's going on? Vanessa gestured at the photos. Just looking at houses. Brian leaned over the table. Whoa, he said. Those look expensive. Melissa smiled politely again. Well, it depends on the financing. Vanessa waved her hand casually. Oh, we'd figure it out. We. That word landed in the room like a dropped glass. I watched my daughter lean over those photos as if she were already living in them, already arranging furniture, already inviting friends over. And not once did she glance in my direction to ask the obvious question. How exactly do you plan to afford that? Melissa finally turned to me again. Your daughter says you've been here quite a while, she said kindly. Since 1994, I replied. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. That's wonderful. Vanessa laughed. Yeah, Mom's basically glued to this place. Glued. Like I was some old piece of furniture no one had gotten around to throwing away yet. Brian flipped one of the photos over. Wait, he said. How much is this one? Melissa mentioned a number. Brian whistled. Vanessa didn't. Instead, she said something that made the air in the room change temperature. Well, she said, glancing at me briefly. Eventually, we'll have the equity from this house anyway. Eventually. Equity. This house? It was such a casual sentence. So smooth. As if my life had already been converted into their future down payment. I looked at the photographs again. Bright kitchens. Clean walls. Empty rooms waiting for someone else's story. And suddenly, something inside my chest settled into place. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just clarity. Melissa gathered the photos neatly. Well, she said, I should probably get going. Vanessa, I'll email you the listings. Vanessa walked her to the door, chatting brightly. Brian went back to the kitchen to look for something else to eat. I stayed where I was. When the front door finally closed again, Vanessa turned back toward the living room. She saw me standing there. What? She said. I picked up the little lemon tart box from my tote bag. Then I asked the question very calmly. Vanessa, I said, when exactly were you planning to buy a house? She rolled her eyes. Relax, Mom. It's not like we're moving tomorrow. I nodded slowly. No. Not tomorrow. But suddenly, 4 days felt like a very interesting number. After Melissa left, the house went back to its usual rhythm, which is to say, none at all. Vanessa disappeared upstairs with her laptop, probably already imagining where she'd put a couch in those glossy townhouse photos. Brian hovered around the kitchen like a confused raccoon, opening cabinets and closing them again, as if food might magically appear if he checked the same shelf 5 times. I took my lemon tart to the back porch. The porch had always been my quiet place. My husband built the little cedar bench out there himself sometime in the late 90s. The wood had faded into a soft gray over the years, and the armrest still had a small burn mark from the time he dropped a cigar during a thunderstorm. I sat down and opened the pastry box. The tart was delicate. Thin crust, pale yellow filling, a dusting of powdered sugar. The cafe owner had slipped it into my delivery bag earlier that morning and winked. "For the nicest driver we have," he'd said. Funny how strangers sometimes treat you better than family. I took a small bite. Bright lemon. Just enough sweetness. Inside the house, I could hear Vanessa's footsteps overhead and Brian dragging a chair across the kitchen tile. For a long time, I'd told myself this was temporary. That's the story parents tell themselves when adult children come home. Just until they get stable again. But stability had quietly passed them by years ago. What they had now was something else entirely. Comfort. And comfort, when it lasts long enough, hardens into entitlement. A breeze moved through the maple tree above the porch. A few early autumn leaves scraped softly across the deck boards. I looked out at the yard. We planted that maple the same year Brian started kindergarten. It was barely taller than him back then. Now the branches stretched wide enough to shade half the driveway. 30 years will do that. 30 years will grow trees. 30 years will pay mortgages. 30 years will build a house. And apparently, 30 years will also teach your children to believe it all belongs to them. I finished the tart and brushed the powdered sugar from my hands. Then I went inside. Brian was standing in front of the open refrigerator again. "You sure we don't have eggs?" he asked without turning around. "I'm sure." Vanessa called down from upstairs. "Mom, did you move my charger?" "No." A few seconds later, her bedroom door slammed. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled down an old plastic storage bin from the top shelf. Inside were folders, dull manila ones I hadn't opened in years. Mortgage documents, tax records, insurance policies, the quiet paperwork of a life. I carried the bin to the dining table and sat down. Brian glanced at the stack. "What's all that?" "Old house papers," I said. He nodded vaguely and went back to his phone. That was the thing about my children. They were curious about food, money, Wi-Fi passwords, but not about anything that actually built the life around them. I opened the first folder. The mortgage statement from the final payment was still there. Paid in full. The date printed across the top made me smile a little. I remembered that day clearly. Your shoulders feel different when the bank no longer owns the roof over your head. I flipped to the deed. Helen Mercer. Only my name. My husband had insisted on that years before he passed. "Just in case," he'd said quietly one evening while we were sorting paperwork. I hadn't understood then how wise that was. Upstairs, Vanessa's voice floated down the hallway. "Brian, do we still have that almond granola?" "No idea." I turned another page. Property tax records, utility bills, insurance renewals. All of it flowing through the same account I'd been feeding with DoorDash deliveries, small savings, and stubborn discipline. For a moment, I just sat there staring at the papers. Then I reached for my phone. The number I needed wasn't saved under anything obvious. It had been written years ago on the back of an envelope tucked into the folder. I typed it in carefully. The phone rang twice. Then a warm, professional voice answered. Pike Realty. This is Marlene speaking. I took a breath. Hello, I said. My name is Helen Mercer. A small pause. How can I help you today, Mrs. Mercer? In the kitchen, Brian laughed at something on his phone. Upstairs, Vanessa's music started playing. Something loud and synthetic that vibrated faintly through the ceiling. I looked at the deed in front of me. My house, I said calmly, is paid off. Another small pause. Well, Marlene replied, a hint of interest entering her voice. That's always a good starting point. I allowed myself the smallest smile. Yes, I said. I imagine it is. Then I asked the question that would quietly change everything in that house. If someone wanted to sell fairly quickly, I said, how fast could that happen? There was a soft shuffle of papers on the other end of the line. Well, Marlene said thoughtfully, in this market, sometimes 4 days. I looked toward the staircase where Vanessa's music was still thumping. 4 days. The number settled into my mind like a coin dropping into a jar. Mrs. Mercer? Marlene asked. Yes, I said. My voice sounded steady. Would you like me to come take a look at the property? I glanced around the kitchen one more time. The sink was finally empty. The lemon magnet still held the Wi-Fi bill to the fridge. And upstairs, my adult children were living their peaceful, consequence-free afternoon. Yes, I told her. I think that would be a very good idea. Marlene Pike arrived 2 days later at exactly 9 in the morning. That alone already put her ahead of most people in my life. The sky was still pale with early light when her silver SUV pulled into the driveway. I had just come back from my first delivery of the day, 2 breakfast burritos and a cup of horchata from a little Mexican cafe that had started opening early for construction crews. The smell of cinnamon rice milk still lingered in the car. I watched Marlene step out and look up at the house. She was in her late 50s, maybe. Neat navy blazer, short blonde hair, the kind of calm confidence you see in people who have been walking through other people's houses for 20 years. She didn't rush. That was the first thing I liked about her. I met her on the front porch. You must be Mrs. Mercer, she said with a warm smile, extending her hand. Helen is fine. Her handshake was firm, but not pushy. I appreciate you meeting early, she said. I start working early, I replied. She glanced at the driveway where my Buick sat under the maple tree. DoorDash? I nodded. My mother does Instacart, Marlene said with a small laugh. Says it keeps her sharper than crossword puzzles. I liked that answer. Inside the house, things were still quiet. Brian and Vanessa rarely woke before 10 unless someone forced the issue, and I hadn't forced anything that morning. Perfect, Marlene said softly when she stepped into the living room. We can walk through without interruptions. She moved slowly through the house, not the way Melissa had with her glossy folders and bright sales voice. Marlene observed things, walls, light, floor lines. She stopped by the kitchen window. Good natural light, she murmured. I leaned against the counter. The cabinets are older, I said. Older cells? She replied calmly. People call it character now. That made me smile. We moved through the dining room, the hallway, the laundry room. Marlene scribbled notes on a small tablet. When we reached the staircase, She lowered her voice slightly. Anyone else living here? My adult children, I said. Do they know you're selling? No. Marlene paused for exactly half a second. Then she nodded once. I understand. And the interesting thing was, she really did. Realtors see families at their strangest moments. Divorce sales, inheritance sales, quiet desperation wrapped in freshly vacuumed carpets. This was probably just another Tuesday to her. We walked upstairs. Vanessa's bedroom door was closed. Music played softly inside, something electronic and restless. Brian's door was half open. I could see his laundry basket overflowing like a defeated laundry volcano. Marlene kept her voice neutral. 3 bedrooms. Good layout. We stepped into the last room, the small office my husband used to work in. His old desk still stood by the window. I had kept it exactly the same. Marlene looked around quietly. People love a home office these days, she said. Then she turned toward me. Mrs. Mercer, can I ask you something directly? Of course. Do you want the fastest sale possible or the highest price possible? That question sat between us for a moment, because the honest answer was a little bit of both. But the real answer was something deeper. I want clean, I said finally. Marlene's eyebrows lifted slightly. Clean? No complications, I said. No delays. No negotiations dragging on for months. She nodded slowly. That usually means pricing it right from the beginning. That's fine. We walked back downstairs. As we reached the kitchen, Brian shuffled in, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and blinking at the sunlight like a cave animal emerging into the world. He looked at Marlene, then at me. Who's this? Marlene smiled politely. Good morning? Brian looked confused. I poured myself a cup of coffee before answering. This is Marlene Pike, I said calmly. She's a realtor. Brian scratched his head. A realtor? Mm-hmm. He looked from me to Marlene again. For what? Marlene glanced at me, giving me the choice. I took a slow sip of coffee. Then I said the sentence as evenly as possible. She's here to help me sell the house. The silence that followed could have been bottled. Brian blinked twice. Wait, he said. What? Upstairs, Vanessa's music stopped suddenly, which meant she had probably heard every word through the floorboards. Marlene closed her tablet with quiet professionalism. Well, she said gently, I'd say this house will photograph beautifully. Brian stared at me like I had just spoken another language. Mom, what are you talking about? I set my coffee cup down, and for the first time since that conversation in the kitchen, I felt completely calm. Don't worry, I said. You'll have plenty of notice. For about 5 seconds after I said, she's here to help me sell the house, Brian just stood there blinking, not angry, not even confused enough to ask the right questions, just stunned, like someone who had been dropped into the middle of a movie halfway through. What house? He asked finally. Marlene didn't laugh, but I saw a tiny flicker in her eyes. This one, I said. Brian leaned against the counter. Mom, you can't just sell the house. Of course I can. Upstairs, a door opened. Vanessa's footsteps hit the hallway fast, the sharp, irritated kind she makes when something has interrupted whatever she was doing online. What's going on? She called down. She appeared at the top of the stairs wearing a silk robe and holding her phone. Then she saw Marlene. Then she saw Brian's face. Then she looked at me. What did you do? The tone already assumed guilt. I folded my hands calmly on the counter. I'm selling the house. Vanessa actually laughed, not a pleasant laugh. A "that's ridiculous" laugh. "Mom," she said, shaking her head. "Very funny. Seriously, though, what's she doing here?" Marlene stood with perfect professional patience, her tablet tucked neatly against her side. "I'm a listing agent," she said politely. Vanessa's smile slowly disappeared. "You're joking." "No." Brian finally pushed himself away from the counter. Wait, he said, running a hand through his hair. "Hold on. You're not actually selling the house, right?" I took another sip of coffee. "Yes." Vanessa walked down the stairs quickly. "You can't do that." I tilted my head. "Why not?" She opened her mouth, closed it again, then tried something else. "Because we live here." That word again. We. I looked at her carefully. "You stay here." Brian frowned. "Mom, what's that supposed to mean?" "It means the house belongs to me." Vanessa crossed her arms. "Well, obviously we know that, but what?" She hesitated. That was the problem when someone had been living inside an assumption for years. When the assumption cracked, the logic underneath it was usually pretty thin. "You can't just decide something like that without talking to us," she said finally. I almost smiled. "I just did talk to you." Brian rubbed his temples. "This is crazy." Marlene stepped in gently, the way people do when they've seen family tension before. "If it helps," she said calmly, "nothing happens overnight. Selling a house takes a little time." Vanessa turned toward her. "Good," she said quickly, "because this isn't happening." Marlene didn't argue. She just looked at me. I answered for both of us. "Oh," I said quietly, "it's happening." Vanessa stared at me like she was trying to figure out whether I'd suddenly developed a brain tumor. "You're being dramatic," she said. "Am I?" "Yes." Brian pointed toward the hallway. "Mom, come on. Let's just talk about this for a second." "We are talking." "No," he said, lowering his voice. "Like actually talk." He gestured toward the living room. I followed him in there. Vanessa stayed near the doorway with her arms crossed, while Marlene politely pretended to study a framed photo on the wall. Brian spoke first. "Okay," he said. "What's going on?" "Nothing." "You don't randomly sell a house for nothing." "It wasn't random," Vanessa scoffed. "This is about the stupid car comment, isn't it?" I didn't answer right away, which told her enough. "Oh my God," she said, throwing her hands in the air. "Mom, you're being ridiculous." Brian looked irritated now. "Seriously? Because we said your car smells like fast food." "That's not why." "Then why?" I looked around the living room, the couch, the rug, the bookshelf with the cracked spine of the cookbook my husband loved. Then I looked back at them. "You two sleep until noon," I said calmly. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "So? You eat the food I buy." Brian opened his mouth to interrupt. "You use the internet I pay for," I continued. Vanessa groaned. "Here we go. You treat my work like it's embarrassing." Brian shook his head. "Mom, nobody said that. You said the smell of fries was embarrassing." Vanessa laughed again. "That's not the same thing." I folded my hands. "For me, it is." The room went quiet. Brian glanced toward Marlene, suddenly aware there was a stranger witnessing all of this. "Look," he said carefully, "if you're upset, we can talk about it. But selling the house is extreme." "Maybe." Vanessa stepped forward. "You're not kicking us out over a smell." I held her gaze. "No," I said. "I'm selling the house." Marlene cleared her throat softly. "Mrs. Mercer," she said, "if you're ready, I can schedule the photographer and start preparing the listing." Vanessa turned toward her. You're seriously entertaining this? Marlene smiled politely. I represent the homeowner. Vanessa looked back at me. Her voice dropped. You wouldn't actually do this to us. That word again. Us. I picked up my car keys from the table. I already did, I said. Then I walked toward the door. Where are you going? Brian asked. Back to work? Vanessa stared after me. You're unbelievable. I paused on the porch, turned back once. You might want to start thinking about what you're going to do next, I said calmly, because the photographer comes tomorrow morning. The photographer arrived the next morning at 8:30. His name was Lucas, a thin young man with a camera bag that probably cost more than my Buick. He stepped out of a small hatchback, stretched his arms once, and looked up at the house with the quiet focus of someone already planning angles in his head. I had been up since 5 again. 3 deliveries before sunrise. 1 order of blueberry pancakes, 2 breakfast sandwiches, and a tray of pistachio croissants from a French bakery that always wrapped things in crisp white paper, like it was sending little gifts out into the world. When I pulled into the driveway, Lucas was already setting up a tripod near the walkway. Mornin', he said. Morning. He glanced at the house. Nice place. I looked at it too. It really was. The maple tree had turned slightly more gold overnight, and the early sun lit the front porch in that soft way that makes everything feel calmer than it actually is. Inside the house, things were not calm. Vanessa had been pacing since 7. I knew because she had woken me up at 6:30, knocking on my bedroom door like the house was on fire. Mom, she had said the second I opened it, tell me you're not actually doing this. I had simply said, good morning. Now, as Lucas followed me through the front door with his camera equipment, the tension inside the house felt like static before a storm. Vanessa stood in the living room with her arms crossed. Brian sat on the couch scrolling his phone, but looking up every few seconds. Lucas paused politely. Should I wait? He asked quietly. No, I said. Go ahead. Vanessa turned toward him. You're seriously going to take pictures of our house? Lucas blinked, then looked at me. I nodded. Yes. Professional instincts kicked in immediately. He smiled politely. Won't take long. Vanessa threw her hands in the air. This is insane. Lucas started in the living room. He adjusted the curtains, moved a lamp 2 inches to the left, crouched low with his camera, then stood on a small folding stool to capture a wider shot. Click, click, click. Each shutter sound felt like another brick being laid in a wall Vanessa couldn't climb over. Brian watched for a while. Then he leaned toward me. Mom, you're really going through with this? Yes. But why now? I thought about that question for a moment. Because the truth was, the decision had been forming quietly for a long time. It didn't begin with the smell comment. That was just the moment the fog lifted. Because I should have done it sooner, I said. Brian rubbed his face. This is going to mess everything up. Lucas moved into the kitchen. The morning light filled the room beautifully. He photographed the countertops, the window, the old oak cabinets Marlene had called character. Vanessa followed him like an irritated shadow. You can't photograph my room, she snapped. Lucas stopped mid-step. Actually, he said carefully, bedrooms are part of the listing. Vanessa looked ready to explode. No. I stepped into the hallway. It's fine, I said. She turned toward me. No, it's not fine. My stuff is in there. Then maybe you should have cleaned it. Brian let out a quiet laugh before catching himself. Vanessa spun toward him. This isn't funny. Lucas waited patiently. Realtors and photographers must see arguments like this every day. Finally, Vanessa stepped aside dramatically. Fine, she said. Take your stupid pictures. Lucas moved upstairs. Brian leaned back on the couch again. You know, he said slowly, Vanessa thought you were bluffing. I wasn't. I can see that now. A few minutes later, we heard Lucas's camera clicking upstairs. Vanessa's voice followed. Don't photograph that corner. Click. I said don't. Click. I sat down in the kitchen chair and looked out the window. The maple leaves moved gently in the breeze. 4 days. Marlene had said houses sometimes sold that fast in this market. 4 days. Brian eventually spoke again. So, what happens if it sells? It will. He stared at the floor. And us? That was the first honest question either of them had asked. You'll figure something out, I said. He looked up sharply. Mom. Yes? You can't just throw us out. I met his eyes. I'm not throwing you out. Lucas came down the stairs at that moment with his camera hanging around his neck. All set, he said cheerfully. Great house. Vanessa stood at the top of the stairs, glaring at everyone. Lucas packed up his equipment. I'll send the photos to Marlene this afternoon, he said. Listing should go live pretty quickly. Pretty quickly. Brian stood slowly. Mom? But I was already reaching for my keys. I have a lunch delivery window, I said. Vanessa laughed again, but it sounded thinner this time. You're really leaving right now? Yes. Brian followed me to the door. When does the listing go up? Probably today. He ran a hand through his hair. And then what? I opened the front door. Then we see how fast 4 days can pass. Outside, the autumn air smelled faintly of wood smoke and fresh bread from the bakery down the street. I walked to my car. Behind me, the house stood quiet. For the first time in years, it felt like it belonged to me again. The listing went live that same afternoon. I was sitting in the parking lot of a small Thai restaurant waiting for an order. Green curry, 2 iced teas, and something labeled cow soy that smelled like turmeric and lime even through the sealed bag. My phone buzzed. Marlene. I answered on the second ring. Well, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. The photos look fantastic. We're live. Already? Already. I leaned back in the driver's seat and looked out at the street. Lunch traffic was moving slowly. People carrying office bags. Someone walking a dog in a tiny red sweater. For them, it was just another Wednesday. For me, it felt like a door had quietly unlocked somewhere. How's the response? I asked. Immediate, Marlene said. 3 showing requests already. I blinked. That fast? Your house is priced right, Helen. And it's clean. Buyers love clean. I thought about the kitchen that morning. The light on the oak cabinets, the maple tree out front. Yes, I said softly. It is. When I got home that afternoon, Vanessa was sitting at the dining table with her laptop open. Brian stood behind her, both of them staring at the screen like they were watching a live news broadcast. Vanessa looked up the second I walked in. It's online. I hung my keys on the hook by the door. Yes. Brian turned the laptop slightly so I could see. There it was. My house, bright photos, wide angles, sunlight pouring through the windows like the place belonged in a magazine. Charming 3-bedroom home, Vanessa read aloud in a mocking voice. Warm, natural light, mature maple tree, classic oak cabinetry. She slammed the laptop shut. You staged it. No, I said. It just looks nice. Brian rubbed the back of his neck. There are already showing times, he said quietly. Yes. Vanessa stood up. You didn't even ask us. I took off my cardigan. You already said that. And you don't care? I care, I said. I just made a decision anyway. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the woman standing in front of her. That might have been true. Brian opened the laptop again. Tomorrow, he said slowly. 2 showings. Vanessa leaned over his shoulder. And 1 Friday morning. Her voice had changed slightly now. The anger was still there, but something else had crept in. Unease. Mom, Brian said carefully, what happens if someone actually buys it? I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. They probably will. That's not what I asked. I drank half the glass before answering. If someone buys it, I said calmly, we move out. Vanessa slammed her hand on the table. This is unbelievable. Brian looked like he might actually be calculating something now. How long would we have? Depends on the closing, I said. Usually 30 days. Vanessa's eyes widened. 30 days? Yes. You're giving us 30 days to find somewhere to live? I'm selling a house, I corrected. That's the same thing. Brian sat down slowly. Vanessa. What? She snapped. He gestured at the laptop. Look at the price. She did. Then she looked at me again. And where exactly are you going to go? She asked. That question hung in the air for a moment. Because until that second, they hadn't even considered that part. They assumed I'd still be there, in the background, paying for things, cooking, existing quietly in the same kitchen. I've been looking, I said. Brian's eyebrows lifted. You already have a place? Almost. Vanessa shook her head. No, you can't just move somewhere without talking to us. I leaned against the counter. Why not? Because we're your family. I looked at her, really looked, at the frustration, at the disbelief, at the sudden fear that comfort might actually end. Yes, I said gently. You are. The room went quiet again. Brian finally closed the laptop. What if it sells fast? He asked. I thought about Marlene's words that morning. 4 days, sometimes faster. Well, I said, then I guess we'll all learn something new. At that moment, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Marlene. 2 more showing requests just came in. Tomorrow afternoon. I smiled faintly. 4 days suddenly felt very possible. The first showing was scheduled for Thursday at 10 in the morning, which meant, for the first time in years, my house woke up early. At 9:30, I was already wiping down the kitchen counters with lemon cleaner, while the smell of fresh coffee drifted through the room. I had finished 2 deliveries before sunrise, a stack of blueberry waffles and a box of delicate almond financiers from the French bakery. Vanessa came downstairs at 9:15. Not noon, 9:15. Her hair was tied up in a rushed knot, and she was wearing one of my old cardigans she must have taken from the hallway closet years ago. You could have told us people were coming this early, she said. I did, I replied calmly. You said Thursday. Today is Thursday? She glared at me. Brian stumbled down the stairs a few minutes later, looking half awake. Are they here yet? He asked. No. He checked the clock like someone waiting for a dentist appointment. Vanessa was pacing now. This is insane, she muttered. Random strangers walking through our rooms. They're buyers, I said. The doorbell rang at exactly 10. Brian froze. Vanessa actually whispered, "Oh my God." I walked to the door and opened it. A young couple stood on the porch. Maybe early 30s. The woman held a small notebook, and the man looked around the yard with quiet interest. Behind them stood Marlene. "Good morning, Helen," she said warmly. "Morning." The couple introduced themselves as Daniel and Priya. Polite, respectful. They even complimented the maple tree before stepping inside. That alone earned them points in my book. Vanessa hovered near the staircase like a security guard who hadn't been trained properly. Brian leaned against the wall, pretending to check his phone while secretly listening to everything. Marlene guided the couple through the living room. "Original oak floors," she said. "Beautiful, natural light." Daniel nodded. "Feels very solid." Priya stepped toward the kitchen window. "Oh, I love this view," she said softly. Vanessa crossed her arms tighter. They walked through the kitchen, the hallway, upstairs. Every footstep upstairs made Vanessa twitch. Brian finally leaned toward me. "This is weird," he whispered. "It's called selling a house." A few minutes later, everyone came back down. Priya turned to me. "You've taken wonderful care of this place," she said kindly. "Thank you." Daniel glanced around the living room again. "You don't see houses kept like this very often." Vanessa rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might fall out. After they left, the silence inside the house felt thick. Brian spoke first. "They actually liked it." "Yes." Vanessa paced again. "Well, good for them." Her voice had that sharp edge again, like someone trying very hard to stay angry instead of scared. Brian looked at his phone. "There's another showing in 3 hours." Vanessa stopped pacing. 3 hours? "Yes." She turned toward me slowly. "You're turning our house into an open house circus." I poured myself another cup of coffee. "No," I said. "I'm selling it." The second showing arrived right on time, then the third. 3 different couples. 3 different conversations about the kitchen, the yard, the maple tree, the quiet street. Each time the door closed behind them, Vanessa's expression got tighter. By evening, the house felt different, like something had shifted under the floorboards. My phone buzzed while I was washing a plate. A message from Marlene. "Helen, call me when you have a moment." I stepped out onto the back porch and returned the call. She answered immediately. "Well," she said. That didn't take long. My stomach tightened slightly. "What happened?" "You have 2 offers already." For a moment, the world went very quiet. "How serious?" "Very." I looked out at the yard. The maple leaves moved gently in the evening breeze. "Are they close to asking?" I asked. "One is," Marlene said. "The other is above." Above. Inside the house, Vanessa's voice carried faintly through the kitchen window. "What if someone actually buys it this week?" Brian answered something I couldn't hear. I smiled slightly. "Send me the details," I told Marlene. When I walked back inside, both of them looked up immediately. Vanessa spoke first. "What did she say?" I set my phone on the counter. "We received offers." Brian blinked. "Already?" "Yes." Vanessa laughed nervously. "That doesn't mean anything." I looked at her. Then I said the words very calmly. "One of them is above asking." The color drained from her face. Brian sat down slowly. And for the first time since this started, neither of them had anything to say. Friends, imagine strangers walking through your own house deciding if they want to buy it. Helen stayed calm. "But that's not easy. Tell me honestly, would you accept the offer right away or wait?" That night, the house was quieter than usual. Not peaceful, just tense. Brian sat at the dining table with his laptop open,
What if you
staring
just
at rental listings the way someone studies a foreign language they never expected to learn. Vanessa was on the couch with her phone pressed to her ear,
Alright,
pacing in small circles.
more for
Yes, I
everyone
know, she was
else.
saying, but she's actually
This is
serious.
a whole
No, I'm not
bunch
kidding.
of summer gold.
The house already has offers.
Summer gold.
I didn't ask who she was talking
He's right
to.
here.
Probably one of the friends who had
Just
complained
gonna
about
have
the
to,
smell of
like,
fries in my
distract you,
car.
Jasper, 'cause, like,
I stood at
all
the
these-
kitchen counter
What?
slicing an apple.
That one's no good.
The knife moved slowly
Easy,
through the
pal.
crisp flesh, the
Okay.
quiet thock of the blade against
That
the
one's
cutting
no
board
good.
echoing
That's
slightly
got
in the
low-key
room.
lick on it.
Strange how ordinary sounds
Yeah.
become louder when everyone else stops talking.
Yeah.
Vanessa hung up the call and turned toward me. You told people
Yeah,
already?
Kelly would just, like,
No.
horf an
Well,
entire
someone
thing
knows,
of
she said sharply.
strawberries
Darlene just
and,
asked me
like,
why you're dumping the
no
house.
questions.
Ah,
No
Darlene
questions.
Shaw.
Boo-boos.
My late husband's cousin. A woman who collected other people's family drama the way some people collect antique spoons. She probably saw the listing, I said. Vanessa scoffed. So now the whole family thinks you've lost your mind. Brian finally spoke from the table. How much were the offers? I wiped my hands on a towel. One is a little over asking. Vanessa stopped pacing. And the other? Quite a bit higher. The room went still again. Brian leaned back slowly in his chair. That's a lot of money. Yes. Vanessa folded her arms. So what? You're just going to take it? Probably. Her voice rose. You didn't even discuss it with us. Brian looked uncomfortable now. Vanessa. No, she snapped. This is ridiculous. She turned toward me. You're making a huge decision that affects all of us. I leaned against the counter. No, I said calmly. I'm making a decision about my house. Her jaw tightened. That's a technicality. I actually laughed at that. At a technicality? Brian rubbed his forehead. Mom, if you sell it that fast, we really only have 30 days. Yes. That's not a lot of time. I took a bite of apple. No, I agreed. It isn't. Vanessa stared at me like she was trying to force guilt into the room. Where are we supposed to go? I chewed slowly. I'm sure you'll figure something out. Brian spoke carefully now. Couldn't you just wait a little longer? Why? So we can plan. You've had years to plan. That landed harder than anything else I'd said. Vanessa shook her head. This is unbelievable. Brian closed the laptop halfway. What if we help with bills? He offered. Vanessa turned toward him. What? Brian looked at me. I mean, if the issue is money. The issue isn't money, I said. He hesitated. Then what is it? I set the apple slice down. The issue, I said quietly, is respect. Neither of them answered. Vanessa looked away first. Brian stared at the table. After a moment, Vanessa grabbed her phone again. This isn't over, she said. I'm calling Ethan. That name made me pause slightly. Ethan Cole? Family attorney. He had handled some paperwork years ago after my husband passed away. Brian frowned. What's Ethan going to do? Vanessa lifted her chin. Maybe he can talk some sense into Mom. I almost smiled. Go ahead, I said. She narrowed her eyes. You're not worried? No. Brian looked between us. Why not? I rinsed the knife in the sink. Because I already knew something Vanessa didn't. Something my husband had arranged a long time ago. The deed, the ownership, the legal details no one ever cared to ask about. When Vanessa dialed Ethan's number, I simply dried my hands and picked up my car keys. Where are you going now? Brian asked. Dinner deliveries. Vanessa scoffed. Unbelievable. I walked to the door. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard her voice inside the house. Ethan? Hi. Yeah,
And then
it's
kinda
Vanessa.
like, coffee
I need to
break.
ask you something about a house sale.
Happy
I closed the door
Saturdays.
behind me. The evening air smelled like
I brought
rain
my
and distant barbecue
TV
smoke.
cart.
In the
Big
driveway, my Buick
T5,
waited
like,
under the maple tree.
made it to hold
For the
milk
first
bottles.
time in years, I was looking forward to the
And
next 30
so
days.
we were cut
Vanessa's
through
call to
the
Ethan lasted almost
through
40
that
minutes.
last week,
I know that
and
because I was still out
there
doing
was
deliveries when it
nothing
ended.
really
The
going
evening
on with
shift had picked
that,
up faster than
and
usual.
I had to
One
just
order
kind of
took me to a small Ethiopian restaurant across town, where the owner packed the food in
put
round
that
metal
together
containers wrapped with foil.
and
The
go out
smell
to
of
the
Berber spice and roasted garlic filled the car so strongly I had to crack the window. Vanessa would have hated it. Too strong. Too embarrassing. I smiled a little as I drove. By the time I got home, the sky had gone dark and the porch light was already on. Inside the house, both of my children were sitting at the dining table like they'd been waiting for a verdict. Brian looked tired.
I just
Vanessa
can't
looked
take it.
furious. That told me everything I needed to
I
know.
was like
I
deciding,
hung my
you
keys
know,
on the
I'd
wall.
seen
Well? I
one of
asked.
these little, it's like
Vanessa
a
stared at
Generation
me. You
Island
knew.
utility cart
I
thing.
walked into the kitchen and set my insulated delivery bag on the counter.
Oh,
Knew what? She stood up so
yeah,
quickly
it
the
was
chair
like
scraped loudly across the
indulgence to
floor.
mean words that
You knew Ethan would say there's nothing we can do.
got her
I poured
dead.
myself a glass of water before answering.
A little bit done,
Yes,
kind of
I
done.
said. Brian rubbed his eyes.
Now
He
would
says
you
the
tell
house is
me
completely in your
how's the
name, he muttered.
frosting?
That's
Or
correct.
if the cake is a
Vanessa
little
pointed at
too
me like I had
frosty?
personally betrayed her.
That's
You
what
never
makes
told
it
us that.
okay.
You never asked. Brian leaned back in his chair. Ethan said, even if we wanted to fight it, we'd lose.
There was like
Vanessa
a bunch
scoffed
of
bitterly.
photos pushed
He
over
literally
to
said,
the
your mother can
side
sell the
here
property tomorrow if
and
she wants. I took a slow
now
sip of water. That sounds like
sometimes, you
Ethan.
need to just
For a moment,
do
no one
that.
spoke.
You just kind of
The
sit
refrigerator
there.
hummed
And then
quietly behind me. Outside,
afternoon,
a
the
car passed down the
neighbors,
street
I
with
don't
its
know, just
headlights
sit
briefly sliding
here
across the living room wall.
and it's getting
Brian finally broke the
done.
silence. So, that's it then.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whether we like it
Vanessa
or
crossed her
not,
arms again.
just,
You planned
okay,
this.
well, this needs to be a
No,
little
I said
shorter.
calmly.
What
I
would
decided
be
it.
that?
She shook her head.
Okay, well,
This is unbelievable.
all right, fine.
Brian opened his laptop
Okay,
again. But this time he wasn't just browsing. He was searching seriously. Rental prices, apartment listings, deposit requirements. The real world had finally knocked on the door. Vanessa noticed.
and so
You're not
there
actually
was
looking for
a
places,
split
she said.
feeling,
Brian didn't look up.
and I'm
What else
having
are we
the
supposed to
same
do?
thing
She's bluffing. I'm not.
with
Brian
the
scrolled through
overall,
another listing.
that are the
Two-bedroom apartments are
It's
expensive.
like,
Vanessa threw her hands
well,
up. Well, we can't afford one right
this
now.
needs to be a little.
Brian finally looked at her. Then we better figure something out.
Oh,
The tension between them had started to turn sideways now. Not just toward me, toward each other.
it's like,
Vanessa paced again. This is ridiculous,
sort
she
of
said.
the-
She's throwing us out
in
because
the
we made a
private
joke about her
business,
stupid
it
food
seems
deliveries.
like a lot of going
That's
back
not why,
around and
Brian said
doing
quietly.
thing, it's
She
like,
spun toward
okay,
him.
well,
Oh,
here's the
really?
thing, no
Then
way,
why?
it's not exactly
Brian hesitated.
what we need.
Then he said something I
Okay,
hadn't
well,
expected. Because we've been
make it.
acting like idiots.
Okay,
Vanessa stared at him.
now then.
Excuse me?
Okay.
Brian gestured toward the kitchen.
And Cindy,
When's the
good
last time you
morning.
paid a bill here? That's not the point. When's the last time either of us bought
Oh,
groceries? Vanessa scoffed.
So,
Don't start this. Brian looked tired. I'm just saying.
so
Maybe
now
we pushed
can-
it too
we can
far.
officially go out
For a
to
moment,
the
Vanessa had no
garage
answer.
now, 'cause we
She turned toward me again. Well, congratulations,
But,
she said coldly. You've turned your own kids against each other.
have
I didn't respond.
2 things.
Brian closed the laptop slowly.
Hopefully.
What about the offers? He asked. I'm reviewing them with Marlene tomorrow.
Yes. Let's go
Vanessa
out,
laughed again.
Casper.
So you're really doing it?
So,
Yes. Brian stood up and walked to the window.
years ago, it was like
The maple
just
tree
about
outside rustled
time.
softly in the night breeze. 30
Well, I
days,
don't think
he
they
said
were
quietly.
ever not,
That's not much time.
but,
No, I said. It isn't. Vanessa grabbed her phone and stormed toward the stairs.
cutting
Unbelievable,
counters,
she muttered again.
or like, was it
Her bedroom
paper
door slammed upstairs a moment later.
that,
Brian
as
stayed by the
far
window.
as, like, it counted.
For a while, neither of us
And
spoke.
I decided, like,
Finally, he said something
well,
softly.
that's kinda
You're serious
expensive,
about
but I
leaving too,
want
aren't
it.
you?
Okay, we'll make
Yes.
it. Okay, I will.
Where?
And
I found a
so,
small place near the river. He turned slightly.
I got
Already?
second
Yes.
oak
Brian nodded slowly.
because maple was
I guess you
like,
really thought this through. I looked around the kitchen one more time. The oak cabinets, the worn floor tile, the refrigerator with the lemon magnet holding the Wi-Fi bill. Yes, I said. I finally did. Brian looked back out the window. Then he asked the question that had been floating in the air all evening. What happens when the house actually sells? I picked up my delivery bag again and carried it to the hallway. Well, I said calmly, in that case, the clock starts ticking. The next morning, the house felt different. Not louder, not calmer, just unsettled. Brian was already awake when I came into the kitchen at 7. That alone told me the world had shifted a little. Normally, he didn't appear before 10 unless something had gone very wrong or very right. He was sitting at the table with a mug of coffee and his laptop open again. Rental listings, application forms, budget calculators, the things responsible adults eventually learn to deal with. Morning, I said. Morning? His voice was quieter than usual. I opened the refrigerator and took out the last container of lentil soup. It had thickened overnight the way good soup does, the cumin and garlic settling into something deeper. Brian watched me for a moment. Mom? Yes? Did you really get offers above asking? Yes. How much above? I gave him the number. He stared at the screen for a second, then let out a low whistle. That's a lot. It is. Vanessa came downstairs 15 minutes later. She looked like she hadn't slept much. Her hair was pulled into a messy knot, and she was wearing one of Brian's hoodies like armor. She stopped halfway into the kitchen when she saw both of us already awake. What now? She muttered. Coffee's fresh, Brian said. She poured a cup without answering and sat across from him. No pacing this time. No dramatic speeches, just quiet irritation. Brian turned the laptop slightly so she could see the screen. Look at this one, he said. Vanessa barely glanced at it. That's tiny. It's affordable, she scoffed. For who? For us? That word hung between them. Us, not including me. Vanessa leaned back in the chair. I'm not living in some depressing shoebox. Brian rubbed his forehead again. Well, unless you've got a better idea. Vanessa didn't answer. She just stared into her coffee. I heated the lentil soup slowly on the stove. The kitchen filled with the smell of cumin, garlic, and tomato. Outside, the maple tree scraped softly against the breeze again, leaves brushing the window like quiet fingertips. My phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Marlene. Helen, the buyers are very serious. One of them wants to move quickly. Can we meet this afternoon? I typed back. Yes. Vanessa noticed the phone. That her again? Yes. She shook her head. You're really going through with this? I didn't respond. Brian looked at me carefully. When would the closing be?
I mean, this
About a
has been
month.
sitting out in the yard.
Vanessa
And I
laughed
was like,
quietly.
it's
So that's it.
okay.
Brian looked at her.
These ones have seen
What?
a lot of
She gestured around the kitchen.
blackberry
This house. Our rooms.
jam
Everything.
and
Brian didn't answer.
whatnot and
He knew she was
squirrels
right.
and
The strange thing about big changes is that
unspeakable
they
every so
rarely arrive
often.
with explosions.
I think the
Most of the
funniest
time,
thing
they
that
show
I
up
ever had
quietly,
with this
like
countertop
paperwork,
is
like emails,
this oak,
like
right?
someone calmly saying
And
30
then
days.
um,
I poured
I
the soup into a
decided
bowl
one
and sat at
time
the
it's like,
table.
well, you
For a few
know,
minutes,
the
none of us
15
spoke.
years has
Then
given us
Brian said
sand,
something that
right?
surprised both of us.
Because
You
this
know,
hot
Sophie
freaking
texted me
oak
last
thing
night.
is just sitting
Vanessa
here.
looked up.
And since
Sophie?
it's, you know,
My daughter.
pretty tight grain,
Vanessa
it's not
frowned.
maple.
What did she want?
Because that, see,
Brian
the
shrugged.
maple
She
is
asked if
tight
Grandma was
grain,
okay.
but it's a
Vanessa
coarse
scoffed.
grain. And
Of
so,
course she's okay. She's the one
it's
blowing up
not
the
as
family.
porous,
Brian ignored that.
right? And so
She said
that's
she
why
might come
they
by this
use
weekend.
maple for
That
cutting,
made me pause.
is because
Sophie
it's
was 16,
tough,
sharp-minded,
you know,
too
standing
observant
to
for
the
her own
winds,
good sometimes.
and it will,
Vanessa rolled her eyes.
not porous.
Great.
So
Now the kids are getting
hopefully
dragged
we'll
into
have
this.
germs.
Brian looked at her. She just wants to see Grandma. Vanessa didn't
Maybe.
reply. She just stared down
So
at the
oak
table.
is up
Finally,
here,
Brian
you
closed the
know, once
laptop
it
again.
kind of like
So,
shrinks
when do you
down,
decide
you
about the
know, it's
offers? He asked me.
iron
This
and
afternoon.
less porous.
Vanessa laughed again, but it sounded hollow
It's
now.
not, you know.
So we might literally lose the house today. I finished the last
It
spoonful
all
of soup
contains
and
a
set the
little
bowl
bit of
down.
maple, so you have
Yes,
to
I
like,
said calmly. That's
you know,
possible. The silence that
intentionally
followed
add a little
felt
bit of
heavier
that
than
natural
anything we'd said
sauces,
so far,
you know,
because for the
not
first
exactly
time,
stainless, you know.
they both
And
understood
so,
something. The house wasn't just being listed, it was already leaving. That afternoon,
so
I met
yeah, I
Marlene
handed
at a
this
small
one
office
out,
near the
and the
courthouse.
funniest thing
It wasn't
was
one of those shiny
I
real
had
estate
never
lounges with
even seen
glass
the
walls and
flyer,
espresso
and I
machines.
was
Just a
sanding this,
quiet
and I was
brick
kind of
building
like,
with a narrow hallway
why
that
do
smelled
I
faintly
smell
of printer ink
musty?
and old carpet. I liked it immediately.
And it took me a
Marlene was
good
already seated at the conference table when I
hour
walked in.
to figure
She had
out
3 folders spread
this
neatly in front of
was
her and a
aged
cup of tea
in
steaming beside
oak
them.
barrels,
You're right on time,
and I'm
she
thinking
said
like,
with a smile.
why?
I
What?
try to be.
How?
I sat across
What
from her.
was this like? Because sometimes, you
Through
know,
the window
it
behind her,
would
I
take
could see
apart
people
like,
walking
you
past the
know,
courthouse
18
steps.
barrels and then sell
Lawyers, clerks,
those,
someone
you
pushing a
know, because they
stroller
would
while
have
talking
like a
loudly on the
stain
phone.
or scent or
Life
something
moving
like that
forward
that's
the way
like,
it always
you know,
does. Marlene
unreproducible, and
slid
so
one of the
you know
folders
you
toward
need
me.
to make furniture out of
These are the
like old
offers.
casks or
3,
old wine
not
barrels.
2. I looked
And
up.
can you
You said 2
imagine
yesterday.
a
A third came in this
sauna
morning,
made
she
out
said.
of like
I
one of
opened the
those
first folder.
large
Numbers,
production
inspection terms,
wine barrels?
closing timelines.
It's like,
The language of people making decisions with money instead of
yeah.
emotions.
You know,
Daniel and
how
Priya
is this
increased
getting
theirs,
away? This
Marlene
is
added.
taking forever
They really
to
love the
figure out.
house.
No,
I studied the numbers quietly. The second offer was
it
higher.
is the
The
oak.
third was the highest. That one came with
But
something
I
interesting,
could
a
totally
fast
like, you
closing
know,
and very few
stand it for
conditions.
like a
Marlene
good
watched me carefully.
hour.
You're in a
So,
strong
okay.
position,
So,
she said.
and
I
then
can see that. I closed the folder
this
and
story
folded my
came up
hands.
because
What would
yesterday
you
I was
do? I
cutting
asked.
some of the
She
big
leaned back
pieces
slightly in her
down so that
chair.
we can like mill the,
Well,
and
she
I
said
smelled
thoughtfully,
that smell
if
again.
you
I'm
want the
going
smoothest
like,
path, the third
no,
offer is
don't start
probably the
me
one.
on that road
The
again.
highest? Yes. And the fastest closing? She nodded. Very
So,
motivated buyers.
yeah.
I thought about the house for a moment. The kitchen window, the maple tree,
Um,
the old cedar
you
bench on
know,
the porch.
Julie's
Then I
going,
thought about Vanessa pacing the living room and Brian staring at rental
yes,
listings at
but
midnight.
end
All
tables
right,
made out of
I
whiskey
said.
barrels. Yeah.
Let's accept
I
it.
mean, it's good.
Marlene
It's
didn't look
it's great
surprised.
smell and
She simply
everything, but I was
nodded
just
and
like,
began pulling paperwork toward her.
what?
Good choice.
Where's this
We spent the next 40 minutes reviewing
But
documents. Initial here,
okay,
sign
okay,
there,
okay.
confirm the closing timeline. 30 days,
And
just
so,
like that.
okay, we in case
When the
we get
final page was
busted,
signed,
we're set there.
Marlene closed the folder with a soft
We
tap.
need to make
Well, Helen, she said,
um
congratulations. Thank you.
ki-
Your house is
decide. Oh
officially
yeah,
under contract.
so that it's
Those
kind of
words
like
landed quietly, not
and
dramatic,
then
just final.
but then
I stepped
and then
outside into the afternoon
then
sunlight a few minutes later.
so you have to like
The air smelled faintly of roasted chestnuts
some of
from a
that
street cart
into
across the road.
gallons,
I stood there for a moment, letting the feelings
but
settle in my
yeah,
chest.
and then the
After
colors of
30
the
years,
paint and then the scent
the
of
house was
that.
no longer mine,
I
and
can
strangely
imagine,
enough,
it gets hot in the
I felt
house and
lighter.
then all of a sudden,
When I got home, both of my
unless,
children were in the
you
living
have
room,
that,
waiting. Vanessa
completely
stood up the
like
moment I walked through the
sealed
door.
everything.
Well, Brian looked up
And
from the
you don't
couch.
go back to,
Did you decide?
sand it.
I set my purse on the entry table. Yes,
And this
Vanessa's
was
voice came out sharp.
morning.
And? I looked at both of them.
Take this one.
The house is under contract. The silence that followed was so thick you could almost feel it in the air. Brian blinked
There you
once.
go.
Already? Yes.
And so
Vanessa's
you
face
can
flushed red. You didn't even tell us you were meeting today. I mentioned it this morning.
so
That's not the same thing.
go over
Brian stood up slowly. So,
So
that's
let's
it.
started on our
Yes.
numbers. We need
He
to
exhaled slowly and ran a hand through his hair.
fix the kitchen.
When do we have to leave?
So here we go.
30 days. Vanessa stared at me like she was trying to decide whether to
This is it.
scream or cry.
Dun, dun,
You're actually
dun.
doing this, she whispered.
And
Yes.
you have no
For a moment,
idea
none of us moved. Then Vanessa suddenly
how
laughed.
long-
Not a happy laugh,
how
a sharp, brittle one.
long
You know what's funny? She said.
it took
What?
to get
You're going to regret this.
this far.
I tilted my head
Had
slightly.
this cute little
Why?
table, but it was
Because when
just too
everything
long.
falls apart, she said coldly,
These milk
don't expect us to
bottles
come running
need to
back.
be,
I looked
added
at her for a
up,
long moment. Then I said the quiet truth she didn't want to hear.
and everything.
I wasn't expecting you to. This is the
But
moment everything changes.
we were just sitting on
Helen
the
didn't
floor,
argue.
and we were
She simply
talking
signed the
over
papers.
and
Sometimes the
everything,
quiet
and,
decisions shake people the most. Would you have done the same?
I've got all
The strange
types-
thing about
I
selling a
tried to
house
make
is
this,
that it
but
doesn't disappear all at
top
once.
height, which is
It fades.
36
One drawer at a
inches,
time, one empty shelf at a time,
which is
one
probably
quiet room after another.
right.
The first week
And
after the
so,
contract was signed, the house
this
still
thing
looked
was-
mostly the same. But if you paid attention, little pieces of it had already started leaving. A stack of my old cookbooks disappeared from the kitchen shelf. 2 boxes appeared by the hallway closet. My winter coat slowly migrated into a suitcase near the bedroom door.
We're supposed to be
Vanessa
taking it
pretended
out
not to
today.
notice any of it. Brian noticed everything.
Had little
By the
cats
second
that
week,
really
the
good
tension in the house
here
had changed shape.
that were just
The shouting was mostly gone.
hanging around
Anger
and
takes a lot of energy, and eventually, even
okay,
angry
then,
people get tired.
underneath, okay,
Vanessa spent
36
more time outside the house now.
top.
Long afternoons, meeting
I
friends,
think we're probably
evenings
gonna
out
get,
that
like,
stretched past midnight.
3/4,
Brian stayed home
maybe
more.
1.5. I don't even know. We'll find out.
One afternoon, I came
And
back
so
from a delivery with a
basically
paper
we're
bag
gonna
full
come
of
in
leftover
and
empanadas from a
whoa,
small
that's
bakery
a
on
strange-
Riverside. The
because
owner
in that
always
way,
slipped an extra
you
one
can,
into the
like,
bag
wheel
when business was
something
slow.
around. It's always nice
Brian
to
was sitting at the dining
organize
table
because
surrounded
you
by
can
papers,
take stuff off
apartment
and
applications,
onto it.
lease agreements, a calculator. You find
That's
something?
that story,
I
I'm
asked.
sticking to that.
Maybe. He
As
turned the
the
laptop toward me.
podcasters, we're
It
gonna
was a
be
small
little bit
2-bedroom
slower, but
apartment above a hardware store about 15 minutes away.
is
Not
what that is.
glamorous,
And so,
but clean.
uh,
Rent's
so
manageable if we
hopefully,
split it, he said. Good. He hesitated.
like
Vanessa
this
hates it.
countertop up here.
That's not surprising. He gave a tired half smile. She thinks something better will come along. I set the empanada bag
Yeah,
on the
like this
table.
countertop up
Sometimes
here.
better things come along, I said.
That's all that is.
And sometimes the thing you can
Um,
afford is the
It's
right one.
just little
Brian
squares
nodded
that
slowly.
we,
You always think
you
about
know,
things like that,
glue
don't you?
together.
Yes.
And as long
We
as
sat
my
quietly for a minute.
big old wood
Then he
clamps
said
haven't
something
been
unexpected.
assassinated with metal
I didn't
work,
realize how much stuff you actually handle in this
so good.
house.
I
I
don't
raised an
have
eyebrow.
tiny
Oh,
nails. All of my
bills,
little finished
insurance,
notes have
property
died,
tax,
so
garbage
I'm not
pickup,
really sure
internet,
quite
everything.
how to glue them
Yes,
together yet, but
Brian
we've
rubbed the
begun
back of his
home.
neck. I guess I never paid attention.
So
That
that'll at least
happens.
smell good.
Upstairs, a door slammed.
Blue eyes in the
Vanessa leaving
morning.
again. Brian glanced toward the stairs.
Beep.
She's still hoping the sale falls through?
So,
It won't. He nodded
so this
slowly.
is what
I figured.
we were
By the
cutting.
third week, the house started looking hollow.
Uh,
My husband's old
there it
office
is.
desk was the first
That's
big
what we
thing to
were
go.
cutting last
I
time.
sold it to a young
Um,
teacher who wanted a
and then
solid
these
workspace
boards
for
were just
grading papers.
hanging around
Watching it leave
out in
felt
the
strange,
yard. I did
but not
actually.
painful, more like closing a chapter you'd already finished reading. A
It
few days
was.
later, the buyer scheduled the
I
final
did
inspection.
actually buy this,
Brian stayed out of the way.
and then
Vanessa
we did
refused to be in
have
the house at all.
I did have
The
some
inspector walked
pieces
through every
left
room
over
with a
from.
flashlight and a
They were
clipboard,
just sitting
checking outlets,
around that were
water
just
pressure,
like
attic
from the
beams.
treehouse and everything.
I
And
followed behind him quietly.
the ones
30
on the
years of
ends,
memories reduced to measurements and
no, the
checklists.
ones on the ends
That maple tree's in great
are
shape,
fine,
he said at one point,
but the
while
ones
looking
in
out the
the
window.
middle.
Yes, I said. It's been here a long time.
So I need, instead
When
of
he left,
5 across,
the
I
house
needed
felt even
6,
emptier.
but
The final week came faster than I
we're using
expected.
that. That's
Boxes
what it
lined
is.
the
It just
hallway.
needs to
Closets
drain
echoed.
that. 'Cause so
Even the
now I can
refrigerator looked
come out
lonely with
with
only a few
picking
containers left
marker
inside.
easy. We
On
put
the
them
last
right
evening before
there, and
closing,
then
Brian
just
stood in the
go.
kitchen holding a mug of tea.
Um,
Vanessa
it's
signed
only
the lease, he said.
taken
That's good.
since
We move into the apartment tomorrow. I nodded.
2010-ish
And
or
you?
so, I think.
I'm leaving tonight.
Because
He blinked.
the reason that
Tonight?
we
Yes.
started
You're
putting
not staying for the closing?
in the
The lawyer is
house
handling
is
it.
because
Brian looked around the kitchen
we'd
slowly.
go out
Then
on
he
a
looked back
big
at me.
outing when it would be
You
just
already
like
packed everything important, didn't
ourselves.
you?
And
Yes.
then Mary
He
would
nodded
put like
again.
warm milk
Where
in the
exactly
ice
is your
cold
new place?
bottle.
Near the river. He smiled faintly.
And then,
You
after
always liked the
like,
water. I did.
2 or 3
We
days
stood
of
there
that, it's
quietly for
like,
another moment. Then Brian said
oh.
something that surprised me again. I
Get
think
some
Sophie will
more
visit you there.
bottles and like,
I'd like that.
okay, don't do that.
Outside, the evening wind moved
And
through the
then,
maple leaves. The sound was
but
softer
we
now,
just,
like the house already knew it belonged to
we've
someone
been
else.
hauling the bottles back
I
and
left the
forth
house
and
just
back
after
and forth.
sunset,
That was
not with a
a
moving truck,
pain. We
not with
just
a long
dropped them back
goodbye.
in and then
Just my
change
Buick,
clothes.
2
We,
suitcases in the trunk,
I think
and a small box on
we
the passenger
stopped
seat with the things that mattered
when
most.
we
My
were not
husband's
on
watch,
test
a
anymore. We
bundle of
didn't
old
have to
photographs,
weigh everything
a quilt
out
my mother
and
stitched in
write
1978,
everything
and a little tin
down
of
and
Darjeeling
be
tea
all
I'd been
like
saving for a quiet evening.
scientific and
The kitchen lights
everything
were
for
still
the
on when I
bottles
walked
that
out.
come to live in the
For a
house.
moment, I stood on the porch and looked back
Um,
through the window.
we still
The oak
have
cabinets,
hot water
the
out
familiar
there,
counter,
but we don't have
the place where I
the
had made 30
drainage
years of dinners.
plumbed in
Funny thing
anymore.
is,
It's like we
I
put
didn't
a
feel
bar on
sad.
top of it.
I felt finished.
And
Brian had already taken the
but
last of his
let's put
boxes
all that
earlier that
stuff back
afternoon.
together
The
again because
apartment
that was
lease
really
started
kind of
today,
nice.
and he wanted to get settled before work on
So I
Monday.
have the top
Vanessa
cover
left an hour
here.
after
I
him.
wanted to
No goodbye, just the sound of her car door slamming and
drawers.
tires rolling down the street.
How many?
The house had been completely
Because
quiet
we need
ever
drawers.
since.
And I stopped
I
short
locked the
here. I
front
don't.
door, slipped the keys into the envelope my lawyer asked me to leave,
Short here.
and set it on the entry table. Tomorrow, the buyers would walk in with their own keys, their own furniture, their own lives, and the house would start a new story. I got into the car and sat there for a minute. The maple tree rustled above me in the evening breeze. 30 years, a marriage, 2 children, A lifetime of grocery lists,
So I don't
birthdays,
know
burnt toast,
what kinds
winter
of
mornings,
stores
and
would
summer
be
barbecues.
empty drawers.
All of it had happened under that roof.
Empty
And
drawers.
now it was over, not erased, just
And we
complete.
should probably
I
line up
started the
with
engine.
this and then we'll
The
put a
drive to my
face
new
on
place took about 20 minutes.
it. So it'll be like the ones over
Closer to the
there
river, just like Brian remembered.
that are
The apartment building wasn't fancy.
patiently
3
awaiting
floors, pale
a
brick, a
faceplate.
narrow
And
balcony overlooking a slow
four
stretch of
times
water
over they're
that
like,
turned
this
silver
is
in the moonlight.
cute.
But when I stepped inside,
Yeah.
it was quiet.
So
Not the tense
what
quiet of a house
happened
full of
is
arguments,
this
a
one
peaceful
is
quiet,
16.
the kind that lets you hear your own breathing again. I
So
carried my suitcases inside and set the little tea tin on the kitchen counter.
so
The
the
place
segments
smelled
that we're
faintly of
going
fresh
to
paint and clean wood.
one,
I opened the balcony door.
2,
Cool
3,
evening air drifted in
4.
from the river. Somewhere nearby, a boat motor hummed softly across the water. For the first time in years,
So
no one needed
Captain
anything from
America,
me.
Mr.
No
Stark,
one was waiting for
write
groceries.
this down.
No one was complaining about the smell of fries.
On
Just
what?
me, and a
We
quiet
need
place to start
some
again.
what? We need
I
some
leaned
what?
on the balcony railing and looked out at the river for a
Uh,
long moment. Then I smiled,
32.
because the truth was simple. I hadn't lost a house. I had finally gotten my life back. So that was Helen's story. Some people will say she was right. Others will say family should always come first. What do you think? Did Helen do the right thing? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe.